They arrested her on the spot for impersonating a Navy SEAL. No ID, no records, no one believed she was real. But when an admiral stepped in, pointed to her military tattoo and said, "That's authentic, everything changed. This isn't just about a woman wrongfully accused of impersonating a Navy SEAL. It's about truth, loyalty, and the cost of being forgotten." Before we continue, drop a comment where in the world are you watching from. We'd love to see how far this story reaches. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because this story is just getting started. In a dimly lit military tribunal room at Camp Langston, tensions were razor sharp. Sloan Mitchell, 32, stood in handcuffs, wearing a Navy uniform that many believed she hadn't earned. Her presence alone sent ripples through the ranks. Nobody knew who she was, and more importantly, no record of her existed in any active database. The assumption was instant: she was impersonating a Navy SEAL. She didn't speak a word. Her steel-gray eyes scanned the room, unshaken, as if she'd seen far worse. Officers muttered under their breath, scoffing at the idea of a ghost SEAL. Some even laughed. No way, she's real. But Sloan never flinched. Not at the cuffs, not at the judgmental stares, not even at the threat of federal charges. Just as the commanding officer lifted the formal report, the heavy doors swung open. Admiral Thomas Granger, one of the most decorated figures in the Navy, entered the room. He stopped cold when he saw her. His eyes narrowed, then widened as he spotted the faded tattoo peeking out from under her sleeve. He took a breath. "That tattoo," he said slowly, "is only given to survivors of Operation Shadow Vortex." Silence fell. Everything had just changed. The room that once buzzed with quiet mockery now fell into a suffocating silence. Admiral Granger's words lingered in the air like smoke from a battlefield, heavy, undeniable, and haunting. Everyone's eyes shifted from the Admiral to Sloan Mitchell. The smug expressions faded. The skeptical glances turned into something closer to awe or fear. The Admiral stepped forward, his voice low but clear. "Uncuff her," he ordered. The MPs hesitated for a moment, unsure if this was some kind of test. "I said uncuff her, now." As the handcuffs clattered to the floor, Sloan slowly rubbed her wrists. Not out of pain, but habit, like she had been through this before. She didn't thank anyone. She didn't speak. She just stood still, letting the tension breathe through every second. The commanding officer finally spoke up, stammering, "Admiral, with all due respect, we couldn't identify her. There's no file, no service number, no clearance log. Sir, if she is who you say, why doesn't she exist?" Admiral Granger's jaw clenched. His eyes never left Sloan, because she wasn't supposed to. He turned to the rest of the room. Operation Shadow Vortex was classified far above top secret. It involved 5 personnel, 4 men, 1 woman. Only 2 made it back alive. One of them was me. The other is standing right in front of you. A collective gasp swept through the room. Some officers took a step back, as if they had just seen a ghost. Others instinctively straightened their posture, silently apologizing with their body language. Sloan finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight. "You buried us," she said quietly. "You let the world think we died." Admiral Granger looked at her with a mixture of guilt and reverence. "We had no choice. If the mission failed, the consequences would have sparked a war we couldn't win. I didn't agree with how it ended, but the order came from above both our heads. You knew the risks." Sloan nodded. "I did. I still do. But I never thought I'd be treated like a criminal for wearing the uniform I earned in blood." Granger took a step closer. "You never should have been. That's on us. On me." For the first time since she entered the room, Emotion flickered across Sloane's face, something between hurt and resolve. "I've spent 10 years in the shadows," she said. "Living off-grid, watching the world move on while I disappeared from history. And when I finally walk back onto base, I'm arrested like some wannabe TikTok soldier trying to steal valor." She turned toward the room, voice rising not in anger, but power. "Let me ask you something. How many of you have taken enemy fire while dragging your teammate through collapsing tunnels filled with gas? How many of you have been left off the record so a mission could stay buried?" Nobody answered, not a sound. Sloane's gaze fell back on the Admiral. "I came back because I heard whispers about a new covert training unit. Young soldiers going into dangerous situations unprepared. I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Granger nodded slowly. "I'll make this right." He turned to the officers. "As of now, Sloane Mitchell is reinstated with full honors. She will be given clearance above Tier 5 and will act as tactical advisor to the Shadow Response Division." A low murmur of surprise rippled through the room. One officer whispered to another, "I thought that division was just a rumor." Sloane didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply took one step forward and extended her hand to the Admiral. "Then let's get back to work." 3 days later, the base looked different. Or maybe it was Sloane who had changed. Gone were the cuffs. Gone was the silence and suspicion. Now she walked freely through Camp Langston, her boots echoing through the halls that once viewed her as a ghost. Officers saluted her with uncertain respect, part legend, part mystery. In the Tactical Command Center, she stood in front of a screen filled with heat maps, encrypted chatter, and classified surveillance feeds. She was back in her element. Training had begun for a new generation of special operations units, and Sloane was shaping them with precision sharper than any knife. But something didn't sit right. That morning, she received an encrypted message, no sender, no signature, no trail, just one line. "You should have stayed dead." She didn't flinch. She just memorized it. At 0200 hours that night, a breach alarm went off in Sector D, a storage facility no one used anymore. Sloane was already awake. Old habits. She arrived before the guards, moving through the dark halls like a shadow. The door to the archive room was ajar. Lights flickered. Inside, something was missing. The original Shadow Vortex mission files, gone. Admiral Granger arrived minutes later. One look at Sloane's face, and he knew this wasn't random. "They knew exactly what to take," she said coldly. Granger rubbed his temples. "There are only 3 people on this base who even know those files existed. You, me, and Colonel Miles," she finished for him, "the guy who signed the burial report." Granger looked like he had seen a ghost himself. "He's been off the radar since last month. Supposed to be in recovery after a training injury." Sloane's eyes narrowed. "He's not recovering. He's hiding." By 0800 hours, news of the break-in was restricted to Tier 5 command only. But Sloane had already begun connecting dots others hadn't noticed. 3 strange things had happened in the last 24 hours. 2 surveillance cameras near the archive wing had gone offline for exactly 6 minutes. A junior comms officer had been reassigned unexpectedly. Her father was a retired intelligence analyst. The tattoo on Sloane's arm, once a symbol of silence, had been photographed during her detainment and leaked. The last one hit her hardest. Someone wasn't just trying to erase her. They were trying to expose everything. She confronted Granger again. "Someone's pulling strings. Someone way above us. This goes beyond stolen files." He didn't argue. "I know. And I think I know who." He handed her a classified dossier, redacted in places, but one word was clear. "Black Star?" Sloane's breath caught for a moment. Not from fear, but from recognition. That was the fallback protocol if Shadow Vortex was compromised. She whispered, "It wasn't supposed to be real. Granger nodded grimly. It's real now. Someone activated it. And if what I'm hearing from intelligence is true, the same people who buried you, they're back. And this time, they're not just cleaning up files. They're erasing the last witnesses. Sloane stared at the monitor displaying live satellite footage. Her face hardened like stone. They're coming to finish the job. Granger placed a hand on her shoulder. Are you ready for this? Sloane didn't hesitate. I was born ready. But this time, I'm not hiding. She grabbed her gear bag, the one she hadn't touched in a decade, and walked out of the command center with the quiet purpose of someone who knew the war wasn't over. It was just beginning again. The old hangar on the outskirts of Camp Langston hadn't been used in years. At least, that's what everyone thought. Sloane stood at its threshold, heart pounding as the rusty door groaned open. Dust danced in the slivers of moonlight, but behind the decay, there were signs of life. Boot prints. Fresh. She was tracking a signal, a silent ping embedded in her old combat gear. Something only her original team would recognize. It had activated 12 hours ago, leading her here. She hadn't spoken their names in over a decade. Most of them were dead. Or at least, they were supposed to be. Inside, she found it a hidden room buried beneath the floorboards, reinforced with lead and steel. A single flickering bulb illuminated a wall covered in maps, surveillance photos, and dossiers on her, on Admiral Granger, on Black Star. And then, a voice behind her. Didn't think you'd come alone. She spun around, gun drawn but froze. It was Echo. Real name Logan Ward, the team's tech op from Operation Shadow Vortex. He'd been presumed KIA. He looked older, rougher, but his eyes still held that sharp, calculating gleam. You're supposed to be dead, she breathed. So are you, he replied. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Echo pulled a chair around, motioning for her to sit. You think Black Star is a rogue faction, he said. You think they're cleaning up the past. But it's deeper than that. Sloane? She didn't respond. They weren't trying to erase you. They were trying to protect you. From what's coming. He stood, grabbing a file from the wall and tossing it onto the table. It slid open to a photo, grainy, infrared, but unmistakable. A military operation gone wrong, with civilian casualties. American soil. Black Star wasn't created to hide missions. It was created to cover up what happens when those missions go wrong, when chain of command breaks down, when someone pulls the trigger before asking questions. Sloane stared at the image. Her throat went dry. She remembered that night. A mission that was meant to rescue hostages turned into a massacre because faulty intel led them into a trap. One child had survived. Sloane had carried her out, wrapped in her own bloodied jacket. The report claimed 0 civilian presence. The truth was sealed. You're saying, Black Star wasn't hunting me. They were silencing anyone who knew the truth. Echo nodded. And Granger. He's not the hero you think. He signed off on every cover-up. He didn't protect you. He used you. Sloane's world tilted. She had spent years burying her memories, believing the silence was for national security, for peace. But now, the pieces fell together in ugly shapes. Maybe it hadn't been about honor. Maybe it had always been about control. You still believe in the mission? Echo asked, quietly. I believe in the people I served with, she replied. But not the ones who erased us. Echo slid a small chip across the table. On here are files that prove everything. Names, orders, satellite footage. But if you release this, I become a traitor, she said. He nodded. And they'll come for you. Harder this time. Sloane stood, pocketing the chip. Her voice was calm but resolute. Let them come. She turned to leave, but paused. Why now? Why reveal this to me? Echo's voice lowered. Because I saw the girl you saved that night. She found me last month. She's grown now, working for a non-profit that helps war victims. She still wears your jacket. Said she's alive because of the quiet soldier who never spoke. Sloane's heart clenched. In that moment, everything shifted. The mission wasn't about secrets anymore. It was about truth. The chip felt heavier in her pocket than it should have. Sloane Mitchell left the hangar without a word, her thoughts churning like a storm at sea. The sky above Camp Langston was overcast, matching her mood. She had enough proof now not just to clear her name, but to expose Black Star, the shadow project that had haunted her for over a decade. But exposure came with a cost. She knew once this data went public, it wouldn't just be generals who fell. Reputations would be ruined, families torn apart, faith in the system shattered. She also knew she'd be hunted. Again, only this time she wouldn't disappear. This time, she'd fight. By morning, Sloane requested a private meeting with Admiral Granger. He entered the command room cautiously, the door sealing behind him with a hiss. I assume this is about the break-in, he said. Any leads? Sloane placed the encrypted chip on the table between them. Granger's face tightened. Where did you get that? You already know, she replied coldly. He reached for it, but she placed her hand over his. Not yet. I need answers first. Granger sat down, slower now, as if a weight pressed on him. I didn't want it to end like this, he said. You weren't supposed to find out. That we killed civilians and buried the evidence, she asked, or that you let your own team rot in the dark while you climbed the ranks. He didn't deny it. I kept Black Star alive because I believed the truth would destroy us. He said, I thought silence was safer. For who she snapped, not for the dead, not for me. Granger leaned forward. Then why haven't you gone public yet? Sloane looked him in the eye. Because I want to do more than destroy the system. I want to fix it. He blinked. How? I want command, she said. Of a unit outside their control, one that answers only to accountability. We expose operations like Black Star from the inside. We protect people like the girl I saved. We use the truth as a weapon. Granger stared at her like she had just declared war, and in a way, she had. You're talking about a counterintelligence division, he said. One that operates without political interference. That's impossible. No, she said calmly. It's overdue. Later that week, she stood in front of a small group of hand-picked soldiers. None wore name tags. All had been ghosted from active duty, casualties of covert missions, just like her. And all of them had something in common: they had survived silence. Sloane addressed them plainly. You were erased because you knew too much, because someone decided your truth was inconvenient. But the fact that you're standing here means they failed. She held up the chip. This holds the blueprint of corruption, but it's only the beginning. We don't just leak files. We dig deeper. We expose. We protect. We fight. A few nodded. One saluted. This was her new mission, not to serve under a flag, but to defend what it was supposed to stand for. Back in her quarters that night, Sloane received a message. Not encrypted. No sender. Just 4 words: we see you now. She didn't delete it. She smiled. Let them come. She wasn't alone anymore. Weeks passed. And with each sunrise, Sloane Mitchell found herself shedding another layer of the silence she had worn for years like armor. But it wasn't easy. Redemption never is. She had always worked alone by design, by necessity. But now, she was training a team. A real one. Not a Black Ops unit sent to vanish, but a squad built for resistance through truth. Each member had a story the system wanted buried. Each of them carried a scar not seen on the skin. They called themselves Echo Team, not after the sound, but after the concept of force born from the reverberation of forgotten voices. Sloan stood in the center of the training yard, watching as a young operative named Miles Carter struggled through an obstacle course. He was fast, agile, but too impatient. He moved like he had something to prove. "Again," she said, without looking up from the stopwatch. He groaned, wiping sweat from his brow. "I've done this 5 times. And each time you skipped the second step on the wall," she replied. "You're not here to be fast. You're here to be precise." Miles glared, but then reset himself. He wasn't angry at her. He was angry at the ghosts chasing him. Sloan recognized that look. She'd seen it in the mirror for years. Later that evening, she found him alone in the mess hall, staring into a half-eaten tray. "You want to know what happens when you rush a mission?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from him. He didn't answer, but he listened. "We were in Tunisia, 2013, hot zone extraction. We moved too fast, missed a thermal reading, lost 2 good people and gave a child a reason to hate this country." Miles blinked. "You were there. I was the one who ordered the breach, and the one who wrote the apology letter no one ever sent." He swallowed hard. "Why are you telling me this?" Sloan looked him dead in the eye. "Because mistakes don't define you. Covering them up does. Learn from it. Don't bury it." That night, Miles completed the course every step, every motion, flawless. Sloane's influence was growing not through fear or command, but through example. She led by owning her story, and in doing so, gave others permission to own theirs. One by one, the members of Echo Team began opening up. Danny Vega, a former drone pilot dishonorably discharged for disobeying a direct order that would have killed civilians now. She managed Echo's field surveillance systems. Jules Park, a medic who was labeled unstable after questioning a commander's judgment, she now oversaw trauma response and psychological fitness. They weren't broken, they were awake. And together, they were building something bigger than revenge. But growth wasn't just about leadership. Sloan began confronting pieces of her past she had long buried. She made contact with the young girl she rescued years ago, the one who survived the failed mission in Jordan. Her name was Lena Farouk, now 19, and working with a global NGO helping war victims. They spoke via encrypted video call. "I always wondered if I'd dreamed you," Lena said, smiling through teary eyes. "They told me the soldier who saved me didn't exist." Sloan smiled softly. They tried to make it true. Lena held up a faded military jacket. Sloan's still intact. "I wear this when I'm scared," she said. "Because it reminds me that even in war, there are people who protect without expecting anything in return." That was the moment Sloan finally allowed herself to feel. Not shame, not guilt, but grace. Then came the call. Admiral Granger, now semi-retired and operating as a silent supporter, alerted her Black Star is rebuilding, quietly, overseas. Their old networks were shifting resources, creating private security firms that operated above international law. "They've gone corporate," he said. "No more patches or uniforms, just suits and deniability." Sloan stared at the intel folder in her hand. She wasn't surprised. She was ready. But this time, she wouldn't charge in. This time, she'd be the scalpel, not the hammer. She called for a briefing with Echo Team. "This is not a revenge mission," she told them. "We are not assassins. We are witnesses. We find the truth, we document it, and we make sure it sees the light. And if they fight back," Jules asked. Sloan's eyes glinted. "Then we make damn sure they never erase another one of us again." That night, Sloan stood alone in her quarters. On her desk sat a worn photo her original team from Operation Shadow Vortex. Most were gone now, ghosts in a system that chose secrecy over justice. She raised a glass to them. You were never forgotten, just hidden. But I'm done hiding. For the first time in her life. Sloane Mitchell didn't feel like a weapon. She felt like a voice, a protector, a builder of something that would outlive her. Growth wasn't a destination. It was a war she chose to fight every day, and finally, she was winning. The cold wind howled across the tarmac as the black transport plane touched down at an undisclosed airfield in Eastern Europe. Echo Team stood ready, gear prepped, eyes focused not with fear, but conviction. Sloane Mitchell stood at the front, scanning the distant tree line. This was it, the final phase. Their mission wasn't about bullets, it was about exposure. Over the past month, they had collected overwhelming evidence of Black Star's reformation off-the-book contracts, silent raids, government collusion, and now. Their final target was within reach, a server farm buried beneath a private compound, housing years of classified operations never meant to see daylight. But this wasn't just a raid, it was a message. Before the mission, Sloane recorded a final log encrypted, time-stamped, and ready to be released should she not return. She sat at her desk, dressed in black fatigues, looking directly into the lens. If you're watching this, it means we succeeded or we paid the price trying. She paused. For years, I lived in the shadows. They said I was a ghost, that I never existed. But I did. And I do. I wore the uniform with pride. I followed orders with honor. And when the truth became too dangerous, they buried us. She leaned in slightly. But honor doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient. Truth doesn't vanish when it's silenced. People like you watching this right now, you are the reason we came back. Don't let silence win. She ended the recording with a single phrase. Remember the invisible. Speak their names. The operation went perfectly until it didn't. Halfway through extraction, they were ambushed. Someone had tipped Black Star off. Gunfire erupted, smoke, chaos, shouts through radios. They fought like hell, not just for themselves, but for the files clutched in their encrypted drives. Danny Vega took a hit to the shoulder. Jules Park was trapped under debris. Sloane dragged her out with one arm and fired with the other. This wasn't war. It was a reckoning. When the dust settled, 4 members were injured, but all were alive, and the drives intact. They disappeared into the night. 2 weeks later, a storm of headlines exploded across global media. Leaked files reveal Secret U.S. Operations Erasing Military Whistleblowers. Echo Team releases evidence of shadow project targeting veterans' names of fallen soldiers, finally cleared after decade of silence. The footage of Sloane's final message aired across networks worldwide. People wept, others protested, and many, especially those in uniform, finally felt seen. A memorial was constructed within a month, not in a public square, but within a secure wing at Arlington, accessible only to families of classified personnel. They called it the Hall of the Unnamed, and etched into its steel wall was a single phrase, for those who served in silence and deserved to be heard. As for Sloane Mitchell, she declined every interview, every medal, every spotlight. Instead, she moved far from the cities, settling near a quiet lake where her original team once trained. But she wasn't hiding. She was healing. Echo Team still operated under a new, independent division backed by allied veterans and watchdog journalists. They didn't seek fame. They sought accountability. One afternoon, a teenage girl arrived at the lake, Lena Farouk, the child she once saved. She handed Sloane a worn-out jacket, Sloane's old field gear. "I think this belongs to you," she smiled. Sloane shook her head gently. "No, it belongs to you now." The two sat by the water. The silence no longer heavy, just peaceful. Lena turned to her. You don't talk about what happened, do you? Sloane stared across the rippling surface of the lake. Talking was never the hard part. Believing someone would listen. That was... Lena whispered, I'm listening. That evening, Sloane opened a letter sent from a military academy. It read, Dear Miss Mitchell, after your testimony reached our school, 10 of our cadets who were on the verge of dropping out decided to stay. They said they finally understood what it means to wear the uniform with integrity. One of them asked us to pass along this message. Tell her I don't want to be remembered for shooting. I want to be remembered for standing up. Thank you for giving them something to believe in. Sloane folded the letter carefully, her throat tightening. She finally understood. Her legacy wasn't what they erased. It was what she inspired others to become. There would always be shadows. There would always be secrets. But now, there would also be voices that refused to stay silent. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of a data server, in the echo of a soldier's oath, in the tears of a child who survived Sloane, Mitchell lived on. Not as a name in a file, but as a symbol. Sloane Mitchell's journey teaches us something we often forget in a world full of noise. Honor isn't given by rank, medals, or recognition. It's lived quietly, through sacrifice and truth. She was erased, forgotten, and even hunted not because she failed, but because she saw what no one had the courage to admit. And when the world tried to silence her, she didn't scream back. She built something louder, a legacy of action, of healing, of integrity. The lesson here is timeless. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stand up, even when no one is watching, and especially when they tell you to stay down. Because truth has a way of resurfacing, and when it does, it needs someone like Sloane, someone like you, to carry it forward. If this story spoke to you, subscribe and tap the bell we share. Voices that refuse to be silenced. Send this to someone who needs to remember truth always finds a way. Thanks for watching. Stay strong. Stay seen.